In 2022, the world of football experienced this absolute earthquake during the World Cup in Qatar. I mean, against all mathematical odds, Saudi Arabia did the unthinkable, and they defeated Lionel Messi's Argentina.
Which, is still considered one of the greatest upsets in modern sports history. I mean,
Mhm.
Argentina was practically destined to win the whole tournament.
Right, exactly. And in most countries, a monumental victory like that gets celebrated with like a massive parade down the main street, or maybe the government declares this sudden impromptu national holiday.
Yeah, everybody takes the day off.
But Saudi Arabia operates on an entirely different plane of reality. Almost immediately after the final whistle, reports started swirling that the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who is widely known as MBS, had actually rewarded every single one of the 26 players with a brand new Rolls-Royce.
And we aren't talking about the entry-level models either. Each of those cars was valued at roughly $400,000.
Wow.
Just a fleet of ultra-luxury vehicles handed out on a whim.
Just wrap your head around that scale for a second. That wasn't the prize for winning the World Cup. That was the prize for winning one single match.
Right.
But the plot thickens because those specific reports about the cars eventually just vanished from global headlines with this very suspicious speed.
Yeah, it was as if someone just, flipped a switch and erased the rumor completely.
Exactly. But whether the cars were real or not, one fact remains completely undeniable today. Cristiano Ronaldo, arguably the most famous athlete alive, now plays his football in the Saudi desert, taking home $200 million every year.
Which is just the ultimate illustration of unimaginable financial leverage. There's really perhaps only one man on the planet today who possesses the capacity to, potentially spend millions on luxury cars for an entire team.
Just out of pocket.
Right, out of pocket. And then seemingly have the international news cycle wiped clean when it suits him, and then casually convince the world's premier athletes to abandon the prestige of European leagues for a desert kingdom.
It's wild. And while the West spends all its time obsessing over tech billionaires in Silicon Valley, true world-altering power doesn't always, seek out a magazine cover. Sometimes it operates quietly from the shadows.
Yeah, and that is the underlying current we're exploring today.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today, our mission is to unpack this fascinating document we have, which is titled Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 Explained: Oil, Power, and the Race to Reinvent a Kingdom.
It's a great read.
It really is. And the goal for you, listening right now, is to understand this incredibly high-stakes, almost desperate game Mohammed bin Salman is playing to reinvent the entire Middle East into what he envisions as the new Europe. And crucially, why this massive transformation is an absolute race against time.
To really grasp the gravity of this race, we have to look at the volatile math of the global oil market, the blueprints for actual science fiction-level megacities, and a cultural whiplash that is rewriting the foundational rules of a very conservative society.
Yeah, it's a lot to cover.
It is. But you cannot understand the future they're rushing toward without understanding the incredibly fragile foundation the kingdom was built upon in the first place.
Okay, so let's wind the clock back about a century. Because the Saudi Arabia we picture today, the skyscrapers, the endless wealth, none of that existed.
None of it.
You essentially have this massive, harsh, unforgiving expanse of sand with no major rivers, no arable farmland, and just a scattered collection of disparate nomadic tribes.
And the consolidation of those tribes was the work of Ibn Saud. And he didn't just stumble into power. According to the document, it was a ruthless, brilliant masterclass in state building.
How did he actually do it, though?
Well, he used a highly calculated mix of strategic marriages, securing the vital backing of hardline religious clerics, and deploying sheer military force to systematically sideline his rivals. This whole campaign culminated in 1927 when he signed the Treaty of Jeddah with Britain.
Which officially recognized him as the ruler of the region, right?
Exactly. But getting a piece of paper from the British Empire is one thing. Sustaining a nation in a barren desert is an entirely different problem.
Right, because sand doesn't pay the bills. And the ultimate pivot point arrives in 1932, and the irony here is just amazing to me. The catalyst didn't even happen inside Saudi Arabia.
Right. It happened right next door.
In Bahrain, they struck oil, and Ibn Saud made what has to be the most lucrative geopolitical gamble in human history. He simply deduced that, hey, if there's oil pooling under the ground in Bahrain, it has to be sitting under my sand, too.
And he was completely correct. In March 1938, at a drilling site famously known as Damam Number 7, they struck black gold.
Dom number 7, that's the one.
Yeah, that single geographical discovery birthed the modern-day empire.
Yeah.
And the sheer scale of the wealth that followed is just difficult for the human brain to process.
Yeah, it really is.
Today, Saudi Arabia sits on the world's second-largest proven oil reserves, and the statistics govern every aspect of their existence. Oil accounts for 90% of their exports,
90%. Wow.
80% of their national budget, and 40% of their entire gross domestic product. The source actually mentions a local saying that perfectly captures the mindset this creates. Money is just the dust off one's feet.
Money is just the dust off one's feet.
Yeah.
And there is so much dust. Like, this sudden, overwhelming wealth created a really fascinating dynamic between the rulers and the citizens.
Yep.
It functions as this unwritten social contract.
Right, the loyalty for prosperity trade-off.
Exactly. The people give absolute, unquestioning loyalty to the House of Saud. And in exchange, the royal family guarantees total economic prosperity. I mean, there's no income tax.
Not at all.
The government ensures citizens are taken care of, often through very comfortable, guaranteed government jobs. I always think of it like a heavily funded Silicon Valley startup.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
If you were one of the early employees, in this case a citizen, you get these lavish, guaranteed perks, free lunches, stock options just for being there. But the unspoken rule is that you never, ever question the CEO.
The prosperity literally buys this stability. It's a highly effective system when the capital is flowing.
Wait, I'm struggling with this, though, because they've built this massive cradle-to-grave welfare state, or sugar daddy state, but the entire thing is funded by one single finite resource.
Right, oil.
So what happens when the world stops buying it, or it just straight up runs out? I mean, isn't this entire empire essentially a multi-generational house of cards just waiting for a strong breeze?
Oh, absolutely. That is the exact existential nightmare keeping their leadership awake at night. Because maintaining that incredibly expensive social contract requires an unfathomable, constant stream of cash.
Right.
Which leads us directly into the massive financial machinery MBS currently wields to keep those cards standing. We really need to look at how the money actually moves.
Because the numbers get completely surreal here. If you look up MBS's personal wealth, it's officially listed at around $25 billion.
Which is massive, obviously.
It is, but frankly, it's less than your average headline-grabbing tech mogul in the U.S.
True. But personal net worth is very much a Western metric. MBS leads a family, the House of Saud, with a collective net worth estimated at $1.4 trillion.
Trillion, with a T.
Yes. That is nearly 3 times the wealth of the richest individual businessmen on Earth. For an absolute monarch, the numbers in a personal bank account are kind of irrelevant compared to the total value of the land he rules and the absolute control he exerts over its resources.
Right, it's a totally different scale. And when a king has that level of absolute control, combined with just a river of oil money, he relies on 2 primary financial engines to influence the globe. Engine number 1 is Saudi Aramco.
The crown jewel.
Yeah, this is the national oil and natural gas company. The state owns 97% of it, meaning MBS effectively controls it. Just to give you a sense of scale, in 2022, Aramco recorded the highest profits of any company globally.
And we aren't talking about revenue here, we're talking about pure profit.
Exactly. It dwarfs Apple, it dwarfs Exxon, it quite literally prints the money.
Then you have engine number 2, which is where things get highly strategic. The Public Investment Fund, or the PIF.
The Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Right. It acts as the vehicle for projecting their power far beyond the borders of the Middle East. We are talking about an investment fund with assets projected to cross the $1 trillion mark by the end of 2024.
That's just insane. That is a pool of discretionary capital larger than the annual budgets of many developed nations.
It is.
Oh.
And they aren't just letting $1 trillion sit in a vault gathering interest. The PIF is aggressively buying the future. They've poured billions into companies that dictate modern life. We're talking Meta, Shopify, PayPal, Alibaba, Uber.
I didn't realize they had stakes in all of those.
Oh, yeah. They have also taken massive, multi-billion-dollar stakes in the global gaming industry, buying into Electronic Arts and Take-Two Interactive.
So Aramco pumps the oil and prints the money. The PIF takes that money and invests it in the global economy. And MBS has his hands on the steering wheel for both.
Exactly. The mechanics of this strategy are brilliant. Having vast oil reserves was, geographical lucky break. But using the PIF to quietly embed themselves inside the global media and technology infrastructure. That is deliberate strategic power.
But see, this is where I need to push back a little based on what the document says about resourcefulness.
Okay, go ahead.
I get that Aramco is the ATM and the PIF is playing the role of this aggressive venture capital firm, but is buying up shares in the company that makes the FIFA video game or owning a chunk of Uber, is that actually buying global influence? Or is it just a really fancy diversified stock portfolio to make them more money? Like, how does owning part of a video game company shield them?
Well, according to the analysis, it's entirely about leverage and softening the narrative.
Okay.
Think about the mechanics of influence here.
Okay.
When a sovereign wealth fund becomes a major, indispensable shareholder in the platforms where global conversations happen or where global entertainment is produced, it subtly changes how that nation is treated by the West.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. You cease to be just an obscure, controversial oil exporter in the desert. You become a crucial board member of the digital economy. If Western tech companies rely on Saudi capital to keep their valuations high, well, Western politicians think twice before imposing heavy sanctions or criticizing Saudi domestic policies.
It's a financial shield.
Exactly. It's an incredibly effective financial shield.
Okay, that makes total sense. They are weaving themselves into the fabric of the West so they can't be untangled. But as powerful as Aramco and the PIF are, this entire trillion-dollar machine has a massive structural flaw,
Why
right?
huge one?
It's entirely vulnerable to a single uncontrollable variable, the global price of a barrel of oil.
And the volatility of that price is terrifying for a nation with an expensive social contract. Look at the historical swings the document outlines. In the summer of 2008, oil surged to nearly $150 a barrel.
So Saudi Arabia was practically drowning in excess cash then.
Exactly. But fast forward to the pandemic crash in April 2020, and the price per barrel collapsed to roughly $16.
$16. You literally cannot budget for a nation. You can't plan infrastructure or guarantee those cushy government jobs when your primary source of income yo-yos like that.
You really can't. And beyond the unpredictable price swings, there is the ticking clock of human progress. Oil is not infinite. The world is aggressively moving toward cleaner, renewable energy.
Right.
If that transition happens, or if the oil simply dries up before Saudi Arabia has established a self-sustaining backup economy, the entire kingdom faces genuine economic collapse.
Now, the sources point out that Saudi Arabia does have one massive, almost unfair advantage in the oil game, which is their extraction costs.
Right. The geography works in their favor.
Yeah, because their oil is located relatively close to the surface and doesn't require like deep sea drilling or complex fracking, it only costs them between $5 and $10 to physically pull a barrel out of the ground.
Which is incredibly cheap.
It is.
Yeah.
Compare that to the United States, where shale extraction costs around $33 a barrel, or Canada, where extracting from oil sands costs roughly $54.
That low extraction cost is the ultimate efficiency advantage. It means even when prices drop, Saudi Arabia still turns a profit while its competitors bleed money.
Right.
And MBS recently tried to use this advantage to manipulate the global market. Because Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader of OPEC, which is essentially this massive cartel of oil-producing nations that agree to coordinate their production levels to control global prices.
And what did MBS try to do?
He convinced the cartel to artificially slow down production, creating a supply shortage. The goal was to force the global price back up toward $100 a barrel to fund all his new projects.
But the strategy backfired, right? Because non-OPEC nations, countries that aren't bound by the cartel's rules, like the US, Brazil, and Norway, they just looked at that artificial gap in the market, saw an opportunity, and started pumping massive amounts of their own oil to fill the void.
Exactly. They just stepped right in.
And the results? The price didn't hit $100. It's currently hovering around $64 a barrel, which is deeply ironic to me. Well, Saudi Arabia literally has the ultimate cheat code, the lowest extraction cost on the planet, and they still couldn't rig the global board. If they can't even force the price of their own golden goose up to their target anymore, doesn't that prove their superpower is already slipping away?
It absolutely proves it, and more importantly, MBS knows it. The failure to control the price was a wake-up call. He understands that the oil addiction is an imminent existential threat.
Which brings us to the pivot.
Yes. That realization is the explicit catalyst for the most radical pivot in modern history. The kingdom has no choice but to build an entirely new, diversified, non-oil economy completely from scratch in the sand.
And that desperation gives birth to Vision 2030. This is the blueprint for the kingdom's survival.
And the sheer ambition of Vision 2030 is staggering. The core objectives are to rapidly diversify national income, attract massive waves of foreign investment, and double the assets of the PIF by the end of the decade.
Double it to 2 trillion.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
But the ultimate metric for success is shifting the economy so that 50% of their gross domestic product comes from non-oil sources. To put that mountain in perspective, right now, non-oil revenue accounts for just 10%.
Wow, from 10 to 50. So to aggressively bridge that massive gap, they are building infrastructure that sounds less like civic engineering and more like the setting of a science fiction novel. Let's look at Neom.
Oh, Neom.
It's fascinating. It's a proposed $500 billion mega project, and the crown jewel of Neom is a city called The Line. According to the document, it's designed as a single, continuous 170-kilometer-long skyscraper stretching across the desert.
170 kilometers, just think about that.
And it is encased entirely in mirrored glass, meaning it reflects the desert and is practically invisible from afar. It will run on 100% renewable energy. There are no traditional roads, no cars. All transportation is handled by autonomous electric vehicles and underground high-speed transit.
It completely defies conventional logic. But Neom isn't just one impossible city. It's an entire planned ecosystem designed to capture different sectors of the global economy.
Right, there are other parts to it.
Yeah, you have Sindala, which is being developed as an ultra-luxury island resort in the Red Sea to capture the yachting crowd. There's Trojena, a massive mountain resort complex that will bizarrely host winter sports in the Middle East.
Winter sports in the desert. Unbelievable.
I know. Then there's Magna, a coastal development blending high-end living with wildlife conservation. And perhaps the most economically vital piece is Oxagon. This is a planned industrial cluster sitting right on global shipping routes, focusing entirely on artificial intelligence, robotics, and the Internet of Things, or IoT.
And for those unfamiliar, IoT essentially means a completely automated industrial sector. Every shipping container, every crane, every factory sensor talks to each other digitally to optimize the supply chain without human intervention. The strategy here is fascinating, though. The document points out that Saudi Arabia rarely tries to be the very first at anything. Like, Bahrain found oil first. The UAE, specifically Dubai, pioneered the luxury desert tourism trend.
Right.
But Saudi Arabia's tactic is to watch the pioneers, take notes, and then use their bottomless capital to be the biggest and the most extreme.
Be the best at it.
Yeah. But let's be real for a second. If we go back to that startup metaphor, the burn rate on these projects is astronomical. Are these megacities genuine, practical places that will actually generate a return on investment? Or is this just a $500 billion marketing campaign to trick Western investors into believing Saudi Arabia is a modern tech hub?
Well, you've hit on the central tension of Vision 2030 right there. It functions as both.
Yeah, right.
Both,
Yeah.
yes. The spectacle is the marketing campaign to attract the capital, but the physical infrastructure has to actually work for the pivot to succeed.
Yeah.
But here is the critical hurdle. You cannot build a futuristic, AI-driven city without a highly educated modern workforce willing to actually live and work in it, which means MBS cannot simply change the skyline. He has to radically and rapidly change the underlying culture of his nation. He has to appease a very specific, incredibly important demographic.
The youth. Because when you look at the demographic data in the source material, it explains everything. 66% of the Saudi population is under the age of 35.
Imagine the pressure of that statistic. This is a generation that grew up entirely connected to the internet. They watch Netflix, they consume global culture on TikTok.
They see how the rest of the world lives.
Exactly. And they want those same opportunities, that same modern lifestyle. So to keep the social contract alive for this specific generation, to keep them loyal, MBS is transforming the cultural fabric of the society at a breakneck pace.
And the result is total cultural whiplash. I mean, overnight, the strict rules just vanished. We're seeing massive electronic music festivals out in the desert.
Raves, basically.
Yeah, raves. Cinemas, which were legally banned for decades, are suddenly reopening and packed. Women finally gain the legal right to drive. You have major Hollywood stars flying in for film festivals, global boxing matches being staged in Riyadh, the WWE holding massive pay-per-view events. They even spent $500 million just to construct the Jeddah Formula One track right on the coast of the Red Sea.
But shoving a hypermodern global culture into a deeply conservative society creates massive, visible contradictions.
I can imagine.
You have these glittering, ultra-modern skyscrapers casting shadows over the holiest sites in Islam, Mecca, and Medina. You have Formula One drivers popping champagne and racing through city streets, all while Sharia law, which is the traditional, comprehensive legal and moral code derived from Islamic scripture, remains the absolute foundation of their legal system.
Just imagine being a conservative cleric who spent 60 years enforcing strict modesty and religious laws, and suddenly you look out your window and there is a rave with David Guetta. The friction has to be intense.
Oh, it's intensely difficult for the conservative elements of the kingdom to digest. There's a deep-seated fear that their unique traditional identity is being cheaply traded away just to buy global relevance and Western approval.
But MBS sees it differently.
Right, from MBS's perspective, this isn't about disrespecting tradition, it's about pure survival. Without this rapid cultural shift to attract talent and appease the youth, they lose their seat at the global table when the oil runs out.
But I have to ask the messy question here, because we're impartial here. We just look at what the document says. I totally understand that putting on a WWE match or a giant music festival makes for fantastic TikTok content to show the West how fun and modern you are.
Sure.
But isn't this just a superficial Band-Aid? Some might call it sports washing. Giving your citizens circuses and F1 races doesn't magically build an underlying tech economy. You can't DJ your way out of an oil dependency.
And that brings us to the harsh reality check of this entire endeavor. You can build the shiny towers, you can host the races, and you can buy the headlines. But the brutal mechanics of execution are what actually matter.
Can they actually pull it off?
Right. Can the empire stabilize itself on this new, untested foundation before the Aramco money printer stops working? Because the financial math is becoming incredibly daunting.
Yeah, the burn rate is catching up to them. Some estimates in the sources suggest that Neom and its associated mega projects could ultimately cost 25 times the entire Saudi national budget.
25 times. Which means the kingdom, despite all its oil wealth, cannot foot the bill alone indefinitely. They desperately need that massive influx of foreign capital, which is notoriously difficult to secure for projects that have never been proven to work.
And we're already seeing the cracks form, right?
We are. There are credible reports that projects like the Trojena Ski Resort and the Sindalah luxury developments are facing significant delays and scaling back their initial impossible timelines.
So, if we follow the futuristic startup metaphor to its logical conclusion, tech startups famously fail 90% of the time. They run out of runway and the model collapses. But if a kid in Silicon Valley fails, an app goes bankrupt, and some venture capitalists lose a tax write-off.
Yeah.
If MBS's gamble fails, if the money runs out and the social contract breaks, does an entire geopolitical region collapse?
The stakes are quite literally that high.
Hmm.
And analyzing this situation yields two very stark, hard lessons for the rest of the world, according to our document. First, in the eyes of the Saudi leadership, tangible results matter vastly more than the messy process of democracy.
Because MBS was not elected by his people.
Exactly. Yet, precisely because he doesn't have to worry about a midterm election or an opposition party, he's executing a long-term vision bolder than almost any democratically elected leader would ever dare attempt. He is willing to risk the entire treasury to force the future into existence.
Because he has absolute authority.
Right. And the second hard lesson is about the nature of power itself. The thesis here is that the social contract is the real constitution of a nation.
Interesting.
If a government can practically provide for its people, guarantee their safety, and secure their economic future, those people will generally stand by that government, regardless of the political system. You can literally build an empire on a pile of sand, provided you intimately understand the needs and desires of the people living on it.
So, bringing all these threads together, what is the ultimate takeaway for us?
Ultimately, Mohammed bin Salman is locked in a relentless race against time. He is taking the vast, finite, lucky wealth accumulated in the 20th century, and he is betting absolutely all of it to buy his nation a permanent, unshakable seat in the 22nd century.
It's all or nothing.
It is. The entire globe is watching to see if the desert will actually transform into the new Europe, or if the money will dry up, the startup will fail, and the dream will simply be reclaimed by the sand.
Think about the massive implications of that. I want to leave you listening right now with a thought experiment to mull over on your own. Imagine MBS actually pulls this off.
Okay.
If he successfully transitions an entire massive nation completely off oil, builds these futuristic utopian cities, and permanently secures his people's prosperity, and he does it all without a single democratic election or public vote, What does that mean for the rest of the world?
That's a profound question.
Will other developing nations look at the messy, slow, gridlocked grind of Western democracy, look over at the ultra efficient Saudi startup model, and decide that absolute power is actually the better, faster way to build the future? It's a fascinating, slightly terrifying thing to think about.
It really challenges the core assumptions of how modern societies are supposed to operate.
It really does. The rumors of those Rolls Royces might have faded from the headlines, but the shock waves of what is being built in the sand right now are going to be felt in every corner of the globe for decades. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the desert's ultimate gamble. We will catch you on the next one.